from a media owner perspective, media owners often will tell you that their sites are ARA compliant, meaning that their sites can allow alcohol advertising. So the landlord doesn't have an issue or a restriction. So that means your site doesn't have an alcohol restriction or the landlord allows it. The ARA compliance of a site has got to do with the AWARE regulation, aware.org, which the alcohol industry have subscribed to. So, and that means, does your site fall within a church, school, or community center within 500 meters of any of those points of interest specifically? So there are two very different terminologies that often get intertwined into one.
Welcome back to the Beyond the Billboard podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe. Today, we're going to be talking about a very important category player in out-of-home, alcohol category. We're going to be talking about why they utilize out-of-home as a medium, what the advertising policies are, and more. We're excited to invite an out-of-home expert and a senior out-of-home business unit lead from iProspect, Michelle Pillai. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, ladies. Good to see you again.
It's just so amazing on the timing of this episode because we know we're heading towards what is a peak season for the alcohol category, which is the summer and festive season. And that leads me into my question for you, the first question of the episode. Why does the alcohol category utilize out-of-home as a medium? What benefits do they see from this, from the medium? And why is the peak season the summer festive season? You know, we know that when you're out and about in that period, you're seeing a lot more alcohol brands that are advertising. They're playing big, they go big, they're utilizing big formats, they're being very innovative out in the market. And it would be just so interesting knowing your expertise on the alcohol category and the brands that you've obviously worked on over all these years and having such an insight into this category in out-of-home specifically as an out-of-home expert. What your take and opinion is on why they utilize out-of-home medium and on that peak seasonality.
So obviously the brands or alcohol brands that generally use out-of-home, use it because you can't skip it, you can't block it, and it's always on. So from that point of view, it's a medium that a consumer can enjoy daily and obviously be exposed to it frequently. There's other platforms or channels that are not offering what out-of-home can deliver in the market. I particularly love a Kantar research study that was done, I think probably a year ago, that speaks to receptivity within the channels, and out-of-home and digital out-of-home was actually the top of that list. So from a channel perspective within SA, consumers are actually most receptive to out-of-home in general. And then it obviously complements other channels too. So out-of-home typically shouldn't be used on its own. It should be used with other complementary mediums like TV, radio, mobile, and social. It acts like a multiplier essentially. So out-of-home definitely adds value to the media mix and the full ecosystem. In terms of the reason why we use or we amplify or upweight in Q4 season, generally, that's seen as a golden quarter within the industry, right? Not just for alcohol, just from a broad perspective, all brands see an economic uplift in terms of spend during Q4 and behavioral changes during Q4. There's a lot of spend that happens in Q4, and brands want to be at the forefront of that and be visible so that people spending their bonuses or 13 checks or Stockfell payouts are receptive to actually the ads that we place and allow for top of mind awareness so that they can spend with our brands. In terms of cultural attributes, basically in Q4, there's a lot of cultural and religious moments that happen in SA. SA is a rich cultural country, and generally there is cultural moments that happen, family reunions, religious holidays. So brands want to tap into this emotional storytelling during these cultural peaks.
That you've mentioned the occasional driven, piece with regards to out of home media and how you can get so targeted when it comes to occasions. And yes, we're talking about summer and we're talking about festive. And we know, as you said, for the medium itself, it's the biggest quarter. I love how you put it there as the golden quarter. We know the medium itself sees this increase of spend for this quarter. That's because people are out more, out and about. There's obviously, as you said, the key festive season for retail, for shopping, a lot of summer-based campaigns. But I also love that you spoke about the occasional piece, because that's just also outside of this festive season. It's such a key piece of using like dynamic digital out of home, being occasional with your targeting there and being tactical. So really awesome that you picked up on and touched on that piece.
When I was working on the alcohol brands that I used to work on, I loved that last quarter because all the gifting came out. So a lot of the alcohol brands have got special bottles or special packs that come out. And there's such a nice thread that runs through to the trade side of the business, right? So the trade guys are getting, all the gondola ends or special builds in store with these beautiful packs on that they've created, often like with a glass and say like a whiskey paired or that type of thing. And it was always great seeing how would that idea translate into the out-of-home creative. When I think back about working on the alcohol brands, probably one of the most stressful times of my life, but also the most enjoyable times. I think that it's high pressure. It's very competitive. So there's a lot of kind of work that goes into the background. And what I really loved was how the alcohol brands really bring the media agency kind of under their wing and entrench them in the culture and kind of being in that energy with the whole client marketing team, joining their workshops. Again, when they're launching their seasonal packs, there was always an occasion that they had around to share all of that with us. And I really loved that feeling, like that stayed with me around that category. Was very exciting to work on. And you really felt so proud that you were putting out of home that had like a special, special builds or special innovation, or there was just like something different going on with the category that felt different to some of the other categories that I'd worked on before. And I also loved how those guys in the alcohol side are always going into the trade. Kirsty and I do some out-of-home fundamental training that we offer to the industry from an agency perspective and media owner perspective and clients. And I've always linked back in that the alcohol and the FMCG categories love to go into the trade. It's part of their business. When I worked with Coca-Cola, it was something we did on a regular basis as you went into the trade. And putting on your out-of-home hat, we also go into the trade. Like a site visit is actually going into the trade and understanding how are people moving around a site? What is unique about this environment? If you're going into environments like townships, how are people walking past murals? What is the route to the closest tavern or spaza shop? So it's really important to understand the dynamics of how people are moving and engaging with the out-of-home. And I think the alcohol guys have got the same intention when they go into trade as to seeing how are people reacting to their brand, how are they consuming their brand. It's really quite a nice link of the out-of-home's like approach to going into trade and the alcohol category in general with their approach to going into trade. And Mish, that kind of leads me onto the question I wanted to ask you was, over the years, we've seen the alcohol category kind of playing big, as we've mentioned, kind of over the seasonality period. But I wanted to find out from you, looking back over the past few years as a category, have you seen budgets kind of be increased or budgets decreasing for out of home? What have you noticed from a spend perspective across that category? I don't know if you want to comment on what you've noticed, some of the trends in the market over the years that you've been working kind of in the industry and on alcohol brands.
So the spend has been relatively stable year on year. There has been periods where it's increased drastically, and that's purely driven by big product launches. That's when you'll see the high increases or spikes. So it's definitely moving forward and higher. And I don't think it's going to change because the reality is, like you said, the alcohol industry is quite competitive. And I think the brands are driving the spend within each other because we're obviously trying to remain top of mind, and to remain top of mind, you need share of voice, right?
Yeah, you've touched on the competitive kind of nature of the category. And I think in the insurance category is competitive, the automotive category is competitive. I just think whichever brand you're working on feels like there is so much competition, but I completely relate to what you're saying from an alcohol point of view. I remember if I've ever had pressure on me around whichever new site became available, or maybe there's a key site everyone's been after, like literally you like to the media
And your life
owners,
depends on
WhatsApp
it,
me,
right?
WhatsApp me, phone me, come to my house. If the site becomes available, I have to know immediately. And the client had the same like request from their side. Liv, if the site's ever available, you come to me like straight away. I'll stop whatever I'm doing to make sure we can get it. So it's like this hunt of sites that was going on. That,
It's
and
actually
I
not
think,
funny because we actually have a wish list. We
yes,
literally have an Excel wish list that we have to keep checking, making sure when sites come out of charge, we have to be there to push the play button, essentially. So literally every month, as part of our duties, this wish list needs to be updated. We need to be checking and making sure we're ahead of the curve, essentially.
100%. And yeah, it's like, oh, what is on your Christmas wish list? Clients like, oh, perfect. Here's my out of home wish list. And you know what? I think that is actually a beautiful thing to have, right? Not a lot of out of home categories perform in that way. So, like I said, although everyone is competitive, I
Yeah.
think this like hunger around wanting specific sites for very specific reasons, it really plays out in the alcohol category quite nicely. What I want to build on from a competitive perspective is, and again, this comes up in a lot of the training that Kirsty and I do. When we were both sitting on the agency side, it came up all the time. Mish, I'm sure it comes up in your daily engagements too, is around ARA compliance and regulations and the policies around advertising alcohol. So since I joined the industry about 13 years ago, they've been speaking about, alcohol advertising going dark, going the same as cigarettes went. And I think it's been going on. That conversation and the tender at the airport seem to have been happening in tandem since I joined the industry. So those are things that seem to come up every year. I certainly don't want to unpack dark advertising in this podcast at all. But what I did want to touch on specifically was the ARA compliance of out of home sites, because I think that there are two kind of understandings or interpretations of it that are quite critical. So from a media owner perspective, media owners often will tell you that their sites are ARA compliant, meaning that their sites can allow alcohol advertising. So the landlord doesn't have an issue or a restriction.
Yeah.
So that means your site doesn't have an alcohol restriction or the landlord allows it. The ARA compliance of a site has got to do with the AWARE regulation, aware.org, which the alcohol industry have subscribed to. So, and that means, does your site fall within a church, school, or community center within 500 meters of any of those points of interest specifically? So there are two very different like terminologies that often get intertwined into one. And I wonder if you could just share from your perspective, kind of how are you seeing it play out in the market? Maybe what is your call out to the industry in that space from a media owner perspective around what to look at?
In terms of nitty-gritties, 500 meters from a place of worship or school, has the crow flies, not driving distance, and it is self-regulated. It is not a government sanctioned rule. So the alcohol body has collectively decided that this is what we need to do in terms of responsible advertising. In addition to that, all billboards or all advertising that you do on billboards and in media in general needs to have an ARA responsibility line that sits obviously at the bottom of the ad. We all need to do our part in terms of being responsible, but I think each brand tackles it, according to their regulations within their businesses. At the end of the day, it's about being responsible. Yeah. In terms of us talking about has the crow flies, CBDs, there's a lot of one-way streets, and although there might be a church or a school 500 meters away, you're never going to see it in your driving distance or in your driving
Sure.
route. So it's about just being responsible as alcohol brands, because it does then have an impact on betting and sugar, because we know, those are industries that also have regulations in terms of advertising. So yeah, brands just need to be responsible and cognizant of where they show up and how they show up to the consumer.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's a great message around the responsibility. I think you've
Yeah.
also touched on it, and I want to kind of highlight it, is that The ARA regulations are self-regulatory for the alcohol industry. Media agencies are not part of or subscribe to the AWARE or the ARA regulations. They obviously work in partnership with their alcohol clients to adhere and to inform them about how the sites might play out. But it's a self-regulatory body that the alcohol clients have subscribed to, and the agency's job is to inform them these sites are ARA compliant, these sites are not ARA compliant, and then working with the client to make a decision on the best sites to go forward with. But yeah, I think you also highlighted, as you say, there are some gray areas. And some of the CBDs, like you say, if it's not line of sight, again, it's about being responsible with your client on making the best choices of sites.
I wanted to change gears quickly and just talk about out of home and digital media spend. So not digital out of home in particular, but out of home and digital media. And with regards to the alcohol category itself, have you seen that move of any of the alcohol out of home spend being channeled into digital media spend? I know that obviously we know that they work so well together. They're such great mediums to support one another. We know how much out of home drives search and how well it works with social media, and also tying social media feeds into out of home. You can be quite dynamic and innovative in that way, but particularly from a movement of spend. I don't know if you've seen that over the years or recently. The reason I also speak about this is I was at an event, an out-of-home event, industry event in South Africa not so long ago. And Chris Botha was speaking, and he did speak about how, over the years of Media Shop doing their media landscape presentations, from 10 years ago when digital media spend was only, 10% or below 10% to now being, over 40%, and that it is ultimately going to be eating and has started eating into the lunch, and it's that piece of pie for out of home spend. So I'm interested to hear for out of home categories specifically, have you seen that shift, or do you still see it very much, out of home and digital media supporting each other and working together?
So yes, digital has definitely eaten into not just out of home, but I think has taken a piece of each of the channels' pie. I mean, definitely, from a print perspective, more money is going to digital because there's online platforms that you can now leverage. Radio to TV. The reality is that no, it's not going to change. But I think brands that focus or use digital out of home without the full media ecosystem are doing disservice to their brands, because the reality is that people are not on their phones 24/7. So yes, it has. But I've actually seen from a digital out of home perspective, that's actually now come in to take some of the digital spend or piece of the pie. Digital out of home used to be, lumped in with static, but it's now become like an always on channel to use within, your 1-year plans and rolling out campaigns throughout the years. I think the reason why most brands are using digital more is because the reality is it's more measurable, and we can directly relate media return on investment to the channel, right?
We've just been doing a measurement series on the podcast. We've had Trish from OMC, we've had Raf from All Unite that have recently released episode, and we have another episode that we'll be releasing. And we're really talking about the measurement and I always call it the evolution of data in the out-of-home landscape in South Africa, and where those challenges sit. But where have we got measurement? Where have we not? But I think the next layer to that is obviously attribution modeling, which is what you're speaking about now, and how easy it is to attribute, a sale on digital media, whereas with out of home, it's a lot less straightforward. I know that there's a lot of clients. I know globally, when we spoke to Tom Goddard, the chairman of World Out of Home, he was saying this is something that's a focus at a global level for the out of home industry, and currently being worked on. I know that locally there's some media owners and clients that are really looking at how can they build up those attribution models to prove how out of home is delivering, in that sale or contributing to that sale down the funnel. So very interesting that you tapped on that, because ultimately, I think as an industry, it's important that they hear this from somebody sitting in a senior seat at an agency. So we need to make sure that ultimately as much of our out-of-home formats and mediums and environments here in South Africa are measured, and obviously measured in a verified methodology, and a methodology that obviously media agencies can compare as close to like for like. and be able to rationalize it to their clients. Because if there's measurement, we're able to obviously determine return on investment or return on advertising spend. Yes, it's another layer before we can get to the attribution piece, but still it'll help us increase that portion of spend. And it's interesting that we're talking about this, because I think on one hand, we all, us three, are in alignment, where we are with the measurement in South Africa and the need for benchmarking and the need for being able to compare like for like. And I think on the one hand, we know this area of key focus, right, to really drive that increase of spend is measurement. And then on the other hand, we do know that out of home in itself, where it is measured, is performing exceptionally well. We know as a medium it is, but it makes it difficult for us to be going to our clients, or for agency people to be going to their clients, to say we know it's performing because of these sites, but we don't know for these sites. Or do you know what I'm saying? It's almost like it's been piecemeal type conversations, whereas we need to be able to have this holistically as a conversation with our clients. It makes it really difficult for agency people to be saying to clients, yes, we know it performs, because these sites can show us that, but we're unsure about the other rest half of your holding or the rest of the schedule. So I think it's also about the benefit of how agency people can sell the medium to their clients when you're able to equip them with all the data that they need, and how important that is.
Nalissa Media, your brand, their eyes, amplified with our out-of-home solutions. Get your brand to the people with Nalissa Media's dynamic out-of-home media solutions, tailored to fit your unique campaign needs. Whether you want to engage audiences on billboards, transit ads, or digital screens, we have the right platform for you. Elevate your brand visibility and impact with our innovative and cost-effective solutions.
I want to kind of throw a curveball for us and kind of lead us to our next question, is around innovation, right? So we're discussing how important and critical measurement is, and it is a fundamental when it comes to media principles, whether you're looking at TV, radio, or digital. But what I wanted to add is that, despite the measurement piece being so significant, and we can agree that it is, there's still the wish list of the sites that the client wants, and guaranteed they want those sites not because they reach X amount of people. They want them because brand stature, specific location, innovation that's possible on those sites. And I think that measurement is one of the pieces. It's a very important piece, but it's not the only decision-making factor when it comes to selecting out of home. But changing on to the innovation pieces, Mish, when we work together, I used to love having catch-ups with you, or like a regular status, to be like, what's going on? And you were always like, oh, some innovation's coming. And that's all that there was really said until something huge happened in the market. And I really kind of, when I think of innovation in out of home and doing like amazing sites, amazing things on out of home inventory and taking it to the next level, I always think of you and your team around how you guys push the boundaries and really drive that innovation for your clients and the brands that you work on inside the alcohol category and outside. And I wanted to find out from you and anybody who's listening to us on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we will link any examples that are shared when we do post this, but would love to hear any examples of either work that you've done that you absolutely love, that was innovative and that stand out to you, or work that you've seen in other markets or that you've seen in the landscape that stand out to you as innovative pieces of work that really kind of come to mind for you.
Yeah. So I think, out of innovation is my passion. I wouldn't be doing out of home media if I couldn't get to do innovation. I think the brands that do innovation well are the brands that tap into cultural moments and tap into a consumer need or a brand need. It can't, there can be out of home innovations that's just cool, and we're like, oh wow, that's so nice, and it looks cool. But there needs to be some sort of need that we are addressing for a brand or for a consumer, because those are the ones that really create an impact. For me, the water producing billboard in Peru, that for me
Yes.
has
Oh,
been
I love
my
that.
favorite innovations of all time, because it really solved. And in SA, if we could actually solve something like that with our challenges that we have in this market, imagine how impactful that could be for a brand that actually takes and owns that sort of innovation.
For anyone listening who's not familiar with the Peru example, we just explain what the campaign was about. We will link it when we post this, and we'll include the video on the YouTube video. But if you can just describe it for anyone who's not familiar, because it was a brilliant piece of work.
So essentially, it was a water-producing billboard. They used an advertising structure, i.e. a billboard, that harvests and filters humidity or atmospheric pressure to create drinkable water. It was called the UTEC Water Billboard in Lima, Peru. And it was developed by one of the universities of technology and engineering. And it was used to demonstrate the societal benefit from an engineering perspective in terms of producing water from an unexpected, billboard or location. So, I mean, it really solved the challenge, and obviously the brand that was behind it received the benefit of being associated or tied to it. I mean, obviously the generic billboard amplification or beautifying of the billboards with LEDs, 3D cutouts. I mean, I've done that, been there, done that, but like we need to start getting a bit deeper.
When you said one of the reasons you do out of home is your passion for innovation, I was like, I think all three of us were just like nodding extremely, because I think it's what we love about doing an out of home. And I think to recognize each other's innovations, like when I see you doing something out there in the market, I'm like, this is so absolutely amazing. And I think one of our other platforms that Liv and I co-manage and co-edit is do.co.za. And we have like these campaign spotlight sections of the newsletter that spotlight really cool campaigns that are happening out in the landscape and out of home. And it's always amazing to keep like a finger on the pulse to see what's happening out there and include those into the newsletter on a monthly basis. And it really just continues to ignite our passion. And speaking about that, I actually want to talk about a campaign a couple of years ago. It was about celebrating you, or You Belong, You Celebrate by Brutal Fruit.
Yes.
It was the women's the digital out of home share where you could submit on you share through Glint or Tractor Outdoor, and you would be able to submit women's names of the woman you wanted to uplift and you wanted to celebrate, and you would select the screen that you wanted to be on, and then it would go live onto that screen with your message and the person's name, and really driving that like personalization, that fame effect, which people often use out of home for, is that impact, that fame effect, that beautiful personalization piece, but then also utilizing that dynamic digital out of home abilities piece. And I've always loved that campaign, particularly because it was focused around, upliftments and celebration of women. Did you do that campaign?
Yes. Well, myself
Awesome.
and my team, obviously. But yes, it was one of the first social do share campaigns that was executed. And like you said, people love to see themselves in outdoor. And I think that was one of the main drivers in terms of actually executing that campaign, especially for the female audience, because yes, we all like to be influencers and we all like to see ourselves on social media. So it really tied in well. And an additional layer was that obviously it wasn't just digital out of home. There was a social element tied to it. And consumers also received those images on email too, so they could obviously share with friends and family and have their little spotlight and fame. So yeah, it was really great. Talking about favorite out of home innovation, IBM and the little ramps that they had done, like hands down, so simplistic, but I mean, ticked boxes, solved a consumer need. And I think a lot of industry people remember that, because the reality is that we solved something for consumer, and it was done so simplistically. So definitely doesn't need to be flashy or cost too much. The reality is that 90% of the time it does cost too much, but there are those innovations that don't have to actually cost an arm and a leg.
Yeah. Michelle, I love that you brought up that IBM, and kind of we are heading towards our close, but I wanted to just build quickly on what you said, is that, so for anybody listening, it's kind of IBM had these installations in the city that it was either attached to a wall and it gave covering for the rain, or it was a ramp over steps so you could go on the ramp rather than using the steps. And it was so simple. And can I tell you that I have been seeing that example since I joined the industry like 13 plus years ago, and I haven't seen anybody else replicate it or do something similar, or build on it, or innovate over it, or do something that people are talking about other than the IBM example for the past 14 years?
We've been trying.
Think about our transit spaces, our commuter environments. It's like, someone do it. Let's do it.
I hope
Someone
one of the
out
brands
there.
listening takes up the call and does it. Like you said, we have a big commuter industry and a lot of problems that we can solve within that space.
We've spoken about this a lot, and a lot of the episodes of the podcast is around, we understand there are about 350 different media owners in the country at the moment, and potentially even more, and so few agency people. And the media owners really have this feeling of wanting to meet with as many agency people as possible, to arrive, to be able to put their best foot forward, to be able to build these strong relationships, obviously to grow their business, but also to be able to do great, amazing work in out of home. And I wonder if you've got any advice or suggestions you want to leave us with for any media owners that are listening, around how to put their best foot forward when it comes to approaching agencies, or even if there's anything specifically related to the alcohol category that you would like to call out. I know we have called out the ARA compliance and the landlord requirement. We've made that big distinguishment, which I think is really critical, and can reduce some of the friction when meeting with media owners or when they present their sites. But if there's anything else you'd like to leave us with.
Yeah. I actually want to make a big call out. Number one, I think there's a perception in the industry that alcohol has big money bags and they're spending the most on out of home. The reality is not true. If you look at the Outdoor Auditors report, we actually not even in the top 10 from a verticals perspective in terms of share spend or share of voice. We're sitting well beyond the 10 mark. So yes, whatever we do it with impact. So if you have any first to market opportunities that can really, that is really taps into consumer centric behaviors, because the reality at the end of the day is that brands are focusing on consumer centric marketing tactics, and we need to focus on finding those niche or first to market technologies that we can then adopt for the brands. So yes, that's number one. Number two, I've seen a general lack of fundamentals in proposals that come through to us. Aerial pictures of billboards. No one's viewing outdoor from the sky, so we don't want to see that anymore, please. Pictures that have been sent that are poor quality and are not from driving perspective. So don't share a picture from from a perspective that is not true to the driving route or how the driver sees the billboard. Lack of data in there. Like a lot of the submissions we get, there's foot traffic or, VAX missing. There's nothing for us to actually base off, why we should be using the billboard. And when it comes to like proximity advertising, because the reality is that out of home is great for that, and we do a lot of proximity advertising, tell me how far the billboard is to the intended point of interest. So there's a lot of fundamentals that need to be fixed within the media owner realm. There are a lot that are doing it well, but really need to focus on the fundamentals and ticking those boxes, making sure all data and proximity targeting, more information about the environment that billboard lives in, so that we can make better decisions and choices for our clients.
Thank you for raising some of those points there, Mish. I just wanted to say that I think what media owners need to know when it comes to sharing photos, and you can agree with me here or not, but I think like those aerial photos are really beautiful to showcase the landscape, but you need to still have a photo that has obviously that, head on, that you can see the structure, you can actually see the quality of the structure, you can see what state it's in, you can see the state of the face, and see it from a driver's perspective. Thank you for raising the fundamentals. As Livia had mentioned earlier on in today's session, Livia and I both run out of home fundamentals training in the industry, and it really is to particularly make sure that people's critical basics are being covered when it comes to out of home. And those types of issues that are still being had by agencies, or, that they're still having to go through, and clients direct, that they're receiving work that has GPS coordinates that take you to the middle of the ocean, that don't have the information that you need, with regards to VAX or the source of the data, don't rationalize the site in accordance to the brief. All these key pieces that need to be boxes that need to be ticked in order to deliver high quality work. I think it's important to note that the media owners are pushing for sales, but you can't be pushing for sales if you aren't, making sure that your fundamentals are in place and that you're ticking those critical boxes. So I think you've raised something really, really important there. Liv, I know you wanted to build on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think, from a media owner perspective, is that you really want to be putting your best foot forward when you are approaching the agencies. And the best way to do that is, as we've mentioned, have accurate information, put your best foot forward with regards to how you're presenting your site. What does it look like? And as you both mentioned, an aerial photo is great to show the perspective, but ultimately, if I can only include one picture on the presentation to the client per site, I need to have a head-on somebody in the car. How would they view it? Or somebody at the airport walking, how would they see it? Or whatever it is. So you want to have that accurate line of sight image too. And I think, as many barriers of entry as you can eliminate as a media owner, if it's very competitive, you want to arrive with a rate card that is slick, that is professional, beautiful photographs, all your data's on there, your data source is linked and referenced. If you're selling digital, how many advertisers in the loop? What is the loop length? What is the slot length? All of those things need to be included up front, so that when agency people are filtering through all of the reverts, sometimes it happens after hours or in the evening, and they're not able to ask you quickly, oh, sorry, how many advertisers are there actually in the loop, or is it 10 or 15 seconds? If everything is on your rate card, then the agencies also know, oh, this media owner, they always send all the information, it's complete, they have all the data on there, I'm going to brief them first.
I have one more thing to say. It's something that's very close to my heart, is that from a media owner perspective and from an agency perspective, we may buy the best locations for brands to advertise on in out of home, but creative is half of that effective pie. So from an effectiveness point of view, I see a lot of media owners allowing poor creative to fly on their screens or structures. Honestly, I think media agencies and brands will appreciate it if you push back, because obviously from an out of home creative best practice point of view, they are, tick boxes that we need to adhere to, and we can't show the effectiveness of the medium if half of that effectiveness lies in creative and it's not being done well. So very important to actually ask media owners to just say no. Give them a one pager on what best practice creative looks like in out of home, because at the end of the day, if that creative doesn't work, whatever we've done is a moot point, and it obviously doesn't then work for the campaign.
Yeah, Mish, that's such a critical point, and we've touched on creativity in quite a few of the episodes on the podcast, and I'm glad that you've reiterated it here, is that all the work that the media agency team and the media owner team go through to actually getting the site in front of the client, secured, ready to go, and then the creative arrives and it's awful. And I think it's also great that you've given permission, because sometimes I've heard from media owners, they're not sure what really to say. They want to say the artwork's not great for out of home, or it won't work in their opinion based on specific things, but they're also not sure where that line stands. So I think it's a great kind of insight that you've shared there, and I think it's a perfect spot for us to end on. And thank you so much for joining us today for today's episode. It's been amazing to sit down with you again and catch up, and also pick your brain from your amazing expertise in the industry. And thanks for shedding some light on the alcohol category specifically for us too.
Great. It's nice seeing you guys again.
Thank you, Mish, for joining us.
Thanks for joining us today to go beyond the billboard. Subscribe to our podcast to ensure you don't miss out on our exciting content.
Join us again to go beyond the billboard.
1, 2,